Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Redneckologist show. I'm Spur,
And I'm Coot.
and this is our fourth. Is this our fourth show or fifth?
Well, together, probably our
Fourth.
fourth.
Yeah, it's a fourth. And this is going to be our first installment for our country music segment.
We're going to try to give you a little bit of knowledge on some things that we looked up, how country music started and where it started and that type of thing.
Yeah, and what influenced it and what led to today's sounds.
I know what influenced it. Everybody loves music in one fashion or another. Now, me, I'm a country music fan. I like the older stuff. But now you get back to that real old stuff, and I get kind of lost in that. But I still like the older country music. And to me, I was born in 1949. So to me, the older country music is, like 60s and 70s.
Right, but we're going to start in the 1920s because that officially is on record its start.
And you got to remember these people that started this, they were just like well-known country stars. Nowadays they call it front porch picking, and that's people got together and did that type of thing.
Oh, yeah. And so, really, from what we've looked up and what we've read about, country music actually got its start from the Appalachian Hill folks, and they would travel down south to do farm work. And when they would do that, of course, they're bringing their instruments and they're playing and they're having their little hoedowns or whatever. There was a music scene started in Atlanta, and the first commercial recordings that were considered to be country were Arkansas Traveler and Turkey in the Straw by two fiddle players. It was Henry Gilliland and A.C. Eck Robertson. And that was on June 30th of 1922. So really, that was just an instrumental recording. But that's really the earliest known recordings that were considered to be hillbilly or country music. A year later, after they recorded that, another fiddle player came along and recorded a tune called Little Log Cabin in the Lane, and that was recorded by quote-unquote fiddling John Carson. I'm not going to name every single influential country music player, but in that era of the 20s, there was a morphing, but that was the birth of it, where stations, actual legitimate business stations, were picking up commercialized recordings.
And I see something here by Vernon Dalhart was the first country singer to have a nationwide hit in May of 1924 with the wreck of the old 97. I had no idea that song was that old.
Yeah, and it may have been redone or whatever. I haven't looked that up. All we have are what we have here in front of us is a skeleton, like a chart of all these influential people and how they fit into the puzzle and the progression of the music.
All right. Other influential artists, that's easy for you to say. Riley Puckett, Don Richardson, Uncle Dave Macon. Now, I've heard of Uncle Dave Macon. Al Hopkins, Ernest V. Stoneman, Charlie Poole, and the Skillet Lickers.
Yeah. There was also steel guitar has always been, fiddles and steel guitar has been a staple of country music since the 20s.
And now we get to somebody that I'm a little bit familiar with. That's Jimmy Rogers in 1927, and the Carter family, which, if you know, Johnny Cash married June Carter Cash. She was a daughter, I guess, of these people called the Carter family, and they were important musicians in Tennessee.
Yeah, but the Tennessee music scene had not started yet. That's going to come a little bit later. Progressing out of the 20s, we hit the 30s and 40s, and that's considered the second generation. So what we were talking about is this first generation. And when we say this, we're talking about commercial country music. We're not talking about people been picking and grinning for forever. We're talking about the commercialization and the recordings. You can trace it back, and there's copyrights and things like that on these songs. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
And I've often wondered about that Grand Ole Opry. We could fix and get into it. 1930s and 40s, the second generation. That's just about when the Grand Ole Opry started.
And it's very important to note that the Great Depression caused record sales to plummet. And that's when they started venues like the Grand Ole Opry, and there was more of them than just the Grand Ole Opry.
That Great Depression caused a lot of things to plummet.
Yeah, and singing cowboys and western swing was popular during that era.
That brings us to Bob Wills.
Woo, Bob Wills, still the king, isn't he?
That's what Waylon Jennings said.
Well, and Bob Wills was controversial because a lot of people didn't want drums in the band. They thought that it messed with the purity of country music and it was destroying it or however you want to put it. But he insisted on having those drums and playing that electric guitar.
And then we get into the late 1930s, 1939. Hillbilly Boogie was born.
Hillbilly Boogie. And country, of course, has a lot of influence from blues but early rock and roll sprang out of.
Amen. And that Hillbilly Boogie was where Elvis Presley picked up that "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog" and style from my blue suede shoes.
Yeah, and according to the research, Hillbilly Boogie was born in 1939. So it's right smack in the middle of that 30s and 40s era.
Then we're going to get to a section here. By the end of World War II, Mountaineer String Band music, a.k.a. bluegrass. Now, there's some bluegrass songs that I like, but I just never was a big fan of bluegrass music.
Yeah, and we have to mention Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs in there.
Oh, yeah, everybody knows them from the Beverly Hillbillies.
And we're going to mention Bob Wills again because he brought the honky-tonk scene around with his insistence on having electric guitars and drums and playing it big. Now, the thing to remember is Bob Wills wasn't interested in being a commercial, quote-unquote, commercial country music artist as far as my research goes. He was interested in playing the honky-tonks and getting people drinking and making money for the establishment.
And he packing them great big bars.
That's right. But he is known now as the father of the electrified country and drums.
And western swing. And from that kind of, I guess, sprang Ernest Tubb, Kitty Wells, that type of people, Lefty Frizzell, Hank Williams.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we get into the 50s and 60s, and that's considered the third generation of country.
The birth of rockabilly, Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, and Carl Perkins. I kind of mentioned on that a while ago, but you know what gets me, Spur, is these people will say, have you heard this blah blah song? And you listen to it and you come to find out that this new artist has redone a song that was made a hit 30 years ago.
Yeah, and they just, and we see it a lot where people put their own twist on it. And we'll get into Dolly Parton and stuff later, but what you got to remember is there's songwriters out there and they write it for country, but you can change the structure of the song and take some of the twang out of it, and make a rock song.
Then we're going to get into the 1955 to 1960 country music, and it gained exposure with the Ozark Jubilee on ABC TV and radio.
Yeah, and anytime something goes that big, it's going to gain a lot more exposure. And people that wouldn't have ever heard it now are hearing it. And not everybody's going to like it, but some people are going to go, whoa, I like that. What is that? And they never would have heard it before, and they're going to start throwing money at it because they want to hear it again.
And I know there's a popular radio station in, I guess it's in Nashville, Tennessee, WSM in Nashville, Tennessee. And I don't know how they done it, but they had the only option to broadcast the Grand Ole Opry. Now, later in years, I remember special TV telecast of the Grand Ole Opry, but that's something that's strictly, more than anything, on that radio station, WSM in Nashville, Tennessee.
And it's another important thing to mention in this era that the mid-1950s was the birth of Nashville. So that's your Nashville music scene. And it was also, there was a mix. There was, I don't know what you call it, the rockabilly stuff, but you had what they called Countrypolitan. And that's, you get your Patsy Clines and things like that in there.
And it seems like that, I don't know if it's a central location or what, but Tennessee is big on music. Now, they've got Nashville for the country music, but also Memphis was rhythm and blues type thing.
Oh yeah, I was gonna mention some the Nashville and Countrypolitan Sounds. They were popularized by artists like Chet Atkins, Owen Bradley, Bob Ferguson, Billy Sherrill. That was the Nashville sound, and then Tammy Wynette, Charlie Rich, Ray Price. That was the Countrypolitan sound. And we also had country soul because you had a lot of crossover. So anytime something goes commercial like that, people want to dip their toes in the water and if it intrigues them musically or whatever. And so you've got your crossover artists and like Ray Charles, and we all know Ray Charles did a lot of work with Willie Nelson, but he did it back in that era of the 50s and 60s with "I Can't Stop Loving You." And then another subgenre from that era was the Bakersfield sound, and more recently that was made popular by what was his name?
Oh, Buck Owens.
No,
Dwight Yoakam.
Dwight Yoakam. But back then it was Buck Owens, like you said.
Merle Haggard got his start there.
Yeah. And it has a distinct sound in that Streets of Bakersfield. I mean, that's a key song. If you really want to know what that Bakersfield sound is, that's it.
See, that was also influenced by Bob Wills, Lefty Frizzell, and by 1966 it was its own sound, the Bakersfield sound. And there we see Buck Owens, Merle Haggard, Tommy Collins, Wayne Stewart, also each of their own, had their own unique style.
And it's also important to mention that by the end of this era, we saw a sharp decline of the Western music, or the cowboy ballads, the old bomba-dee-da, bomba-dee, that type of stuff. It was just being overwhelmed by things that people wanted to listen to that was more upbeat and peppy.
Now we're going to get into the 1970s and 80s. That's the fourth generation country. And we're going to talk about outlaw country.
Oh, outlaw country. One of my favorites. Outlaw country is one of my favorites. And you can't mention outlaw country without mentioning Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings.
And I think Hank Jr. and Johnny Cash and several more got on board with them.
Oh, David Allan Coe.
Yes.
Chris Christopherson. That's another good one.
I've always envied people that could really do good singing, but these people that know how to write these songs and they can also sing them, man, I'm double envious of these type people.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the bigger ones, now I know Chris Christopherson, you can flip a quarter and figure out how many people think he can sing and how many think he can't. Now, he could carry a tune pretty good, but he didn't have that sultry, silky voice. But it fit outlaw country.
Yeah, but that man wrote some good songs.
Oh, he did. Now, during the mid-1970s, too, though, brought about what was considered country pop. And we hear a lot of that still today.
Yeah, I see two names here, Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers. One of the best songs they ever recorded in my book is Islands in the Stream, and guess who wrote that? The Bee Gees.
Well, and there's other names on that list.
Crystal Gale and Ronnie Millsap.
Yeah, and Barbara Mandrell. And then the 1980s artists were readily seen on the pop charts. And so they were crossing over. Pop stations were playing the songs.
Was Crystal Gale, wasn't she a coal miner's daughter? Wasn't they sisters? Yeah, Loretta Lynn and Crystal Gale, I heard they were sisters. I'm not sure about it, but
yeah, and I'm not going to put a stamp of a verification on that because I really don't know. Okay, so country rock also rose up during this generation.
We talking about in the 1980s?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
we're in the 70s, 80s.
There's Willie Nelson and Juice Newton.
Rolling Stones got into it with they had a song called Dead Flowers.
Oh, by the way, there's that song I was talking about, Islands in the Stream. A duet by Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers made #1 spot. However, it was bested only by Diana Ross and Lionel Richie's Endless Love.
Yeah, now that's back in the pop. That was
Right.
on the pop. And then over into the rock, country rock, a lot of people got in on the country sound during that time. Grateful Dead, Neil Young, bunch of different ones.
That Marshall Tucker band, I always did like them. They, like you said, that steel guitar has always been in there, and they really emphasized on that. And I really loved their music as much as their lyrics.
Now, sticking with the country rock, when you get into the 80s, you can see a progression. What it is an updated version of it. We see, Shania Twain, Brooks and Dunn, Faith Hill, and there's mixed opinions on the next artist I'm about to name, Garth Brooks, but you have to admit he took country international.
He did. He made bukus of money doing it.
Yeah, and other names to mention, of course, Faith Hill, Alan Jackson. We mentioned Dwight Yoakam earlier. He was in this group. Steve Earle, Dolly Parton, a huge songwriter Dolly Parton was. Roseanne Cash, Linda Ronstadt. But there was a lot of progression and a lot of updates. Well, and I won't say updates. What they were was you see more of a crossover from the traditional country into crossing those lines, blurring the lines between rock and pop and all that.
Then we're going to hit the 1990s.
And that's considered the fifth generation of country music. And again, we mentioned him earlier, but this is where country music became international, worldwide phenomenon with Garth Brooks.
Yeah, he was just one of the few. Clint Black, Sammy Kershaw, Aaron Tippin, Travis Tritt, Alan Jackson. Still love to hear old Alan sing. He got that real smooth voice and everything.
And one of them that I consider the king is George Strait. He came along in this era. He is still one of my favorite that sticks with the older.
I used to wonder why I'd sit up and watch them country music academy deals where they gave those trophies away or whatever, and he was hardly ever mentioned in there. And then all of a sudden, I guess everybody came to their senses when a man has that many number one hits in a row, he's got to be recognized.
Yeah,
Talk about Mr. Strait.
Yeah, he's been overlooked so much. But now we can't go without mentioning the female artists either. We got Reba McEntire, Patty Loveless, Faith Hill. We mentioned her earlier. Martina McBride. That's one of my favorite right there. Dina Carter had a couple of little runs in there. Leanne Rimes.
She didn't last too long in the country. She kind of crossed over pretty quick, as did the little Swift girl.
Yeah, and Taylor is still kind of considered country, I guess, but yeah, she's more pop. She's more of a pop artist.
Yeah, it's Shania Twain. I just ain't never heard no woman. Did she write her own stuff or?
It's talking about Shania Twain?
You're right.
Well, she was also Canadian, so.
Yeah.
For what that's worth.
But she's in North America, so.
Yeah. But now, there's the next one I'm going to mention, had a lot of controversy because of some comments they made while they were in England.
I'd still just soon to listen to them as any of them, though.
I do. I like the Dixie Chicks. They have a really good sound. They're not together right now, I don't believe.
I really don't know, but we still get them on that Sirius XM radio.
Yeah, we do. We listen to a lot of country music on that thing. We switch around between those channels, trying to hear some older stuff and newer stuff. And another good place to really fall off down what I call rabbit holes when you're listening to country music is Pandora. Get that on your phone or whatever and hook it up to some speakers and put in some obscure artist and let it go.
I've drank many a beer listening to that.
Oh, yeah.
Then we're going to get into the 2000s to the present, and y'all going to lose me because this just ain't my type of music, really.
Yeah, and this is it's considered the sixth generation of country music. I do like some of it. I mean, a lot of the bands were still there. They were coming along. Some of these artists are still recording from the earlier era. But you've got some new ones coming in. But you also had a lot of crossover between country and pop in this era as well. Things with Richard Marx recording Days in Avalon album, which it featured 5 country songs on it.
Oh, yeah, I see a lot of artists here that I love to hear them sing. Oh, Alison Krauss, they can't nobody match her.
Yeah, she sang a song with him called Straight from the Heart. But now, Bon Jovi, this is a well-known one, had a hit with Jennifer Nettles of Sugarland with that Who Says You Can't Go Home, and I'm sure everybody's going to do, oh, I know that song, listening to younger folks. But yeah, I love Jennifer Nettles' voice. I like Sugarland.
Yeah, some of these artists I recognize, but for the most part, they got so many new ones coming out. It's hard for me to keep up with them. I don't listen to contemporary radio that much.
Well, and when you dissect the music, it's funny to me because they get country stars to sing with them. like Bon Jovi and Jennifer Nettles and Marks and Carpenter and all that. But then you had like Kid Rock and Sheryl Crow recording Picture, that song. And they considered it a country rock hybrid song. And he's had some other stuff that sounds kind of country, but then he goes into that rap stuff in there.
Well, I heard this old boy a while back. He had a song out, and he said, I could be a big star if I could just get Willie and Waylon to sing along with me.
Yeah. Now, and here's one for you. He didn't just write a crossover song. He crossed the heck over. And that's Hootie from Hootie and the Blowfish.
Yeah, that's right.
Darius Rucker. And he's had some good songs. I think they're okay. Some of them sound kind of, to me, a little bit shallow, but they're pretty good.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. Then there's Carrie Underwood.
Oh, this is American Idol stuff here. Yeah.
This here is, every time I think of Carrie Underwood, I think about that poor old boy's four-wheel drive she tore up.
Yeah, but American Idol gave rise, of course, to her. Kelly Pickler. There's names on here I don't recognize. Josh Grayson, Bucky Covington, Christy Lee Cook. I'm not going to name them all.
Kelly Clarkson, I recognize that one.
And I do recognize Scotty McCreery? Yeah. I recognize that name. I think some of them may not have done much, after that, or haven't gotten really their start commercially yet. I don't know, because I haven't heard of these people. So I don't watch American Idol.
And then sitcoms gave rise to artists such as Miley Cyrus.
Yeah, well, Hannah Montana.
Yeah, and her dad had one pretty good hit song.
Achy Breaky Heart.
Achy Breaky Heart.
Yeah.
That was about it for him, but I guess that kind of vaulted her into existence or whatever. She started off with Walt Disney, didn't she?
Yeah, she was that was Hannah Montana thing. I think that was on Disney Channel. There's a few others, but some of them are total pop. I mean, they didn't go country. But her dad had his claws in country, so I guess that's, she kind of went. But she has some pop songs. Yeah, sticking with the sitcom thing, one of the bigger ones that I've heard of. Now, I don't watch TV, so I can just go ahead and tell you right now, I don't watch sitcoms. I don't do that. I work a lot outside, and I spend a lot of time outside, and we listen to the radio. I've heard of the Hayden Panettiere, or however you say her name, from that show Nashville. I guess they're writing some decent songs for that, and she's putting them out there for that show.
What in the world is this bro country?
Oh, that's one of my favorite now for the newer stuff. I love the bro country. You got Luke Bryan, Jason Aldean, Blake Shelton, and Florida Georgia Line. That's just the name of a handful of them. But Florida Georgia Line's got some good songs.
They do. They're a good couple of good artists.
Yeah, Jason Aldean, he had that Dirt Road. I think, wasn't that him? Had that song Dirt Road?
I'm not sure.
Where he raps a little in it, talking about knock that big mouth out or something like that.
I don't remember.
I think that was him. I knew
I said, I'm about lost when it comes to a lot of these songs.
But it's telling, though, with that song. I heard it a lot because I knew a certain 8-year-old that just ate that song up. And that might be a little telling about Jason Aldean. I'm not sure. I'm not gonna badmouth the guy, but
well, I know he's had some good hits, and I enjoy listening to him. But what I was talking about, going from the 90s to the 2000s, I can hear an artist singing and playing or whatever, and I cannot tell you who it is. But you take anything from probably 1980 back, and I can almost tell you the artist.
Yeah, and there's also another little subgenre that's starting to pop up here and there, and they're calling it alt country. So when an artist records something, they're just recording the song, and if they're popular and it's a decent tune, it's going to go up in the charts one way or another. But one of the more popular ones from that is when Tim McGraw sang "When the Stars Go Blue." They're calling that alternative country.
Alternative country.
Yeah.
And then we got to, last but not least, we got to mention the international people, such as you mentioned a while ago. Shania Twain is from Canada, but we also got another big artist, Keith Urban, from Australia, of all places.
Yeah, he's Australian, and it's important to note that there's country music festivals are really popular in the UK now. And so that's given more of an international flair, to the songs and all, and they when they write them, but I think that came with going pop and rock country and, commercial.
Yeah, it's like I've said, I don't know how many times, this country music that I'm listening to nowadays on the radios is kind of like our 50s and 60s rock and roll. And that's what I cut my teeth on. I loved rock and roll when I was just a teenager. After I got in my early to mid 20s, I just went completely country. And brother, we had some good artists, and they're still good artists, but there's people that was dead and gone, like Hank Williams, by the time I started listening to the radio earnestly. And I just loved all of his songs. I mean, he's just a good songwriter and singer.
Well, I hate to cut this short, but I was thinking about making this 2 episodes, but we're trying to cram it into one, and we're running a little over on this, and we apologize for that. It being a little bit longer than intended. That's going to be about all we're going to be able to bring you for today. Yeah, we're going to have to wrap this up, and I'm Spur.
And I'm Coot.
And don't forget to subscribe.